the way of God. He has a way. And we have these things that we attempt to handle in our lives that are not of his way. And we need to. And so if cynicism is an issue in our life, if the lack of forgiveness or bitterness is an issue in our lives, then we need to deal with it. So I'm going to have us start off this morning with Isaac Bixler. And, he's a young chap. And he hasn't had time to get cynical.
That's not true.
He's barely had time to need to forgive. He definitely doesn't have time to be jealous. So he said he's going to talk to us a bit about handling bitterness and forgiveness, and so we're going to see what he does.
If I'm being honest, when Elmer asked me to do this, his message of cynicism was still sitting over me, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm too cynical for that. My wife informs me that I'm not as cynical as I think I am, but it still just sits with me, and it's good to have things pointed out to you that you don't really recognize, and I think that's what it was for me last Sunday. Like Elmer said, I'm only 23. I haven't had the opportunities that some of you have had to be bitter over something or to be cynical or whatever you want to say. But I have had experiences, and I've been bitter over things, and I think this morning I'm just going to share a little bit about my experience with bitterness. My biggest experience with bitterness, I was, I think, 18. I'm going to try and be as vague as possible while still being as specific as possible. So I was 18, and somebody wronged me. Or at least I thought somebody wronged me. The thing with bitterness is it doesn't matter whether they actually wronged you or not. All that it takes is for you to think it happened. So I thought this person wronged me. And I began to get angry. And this anger became a part of who I was. If you would have met me when I was 18 and 19, you would have recognized me as a very angry, upset man. And so I was angry at this person. I was mad at them for what they had done, and it became my identity. And so my youth pastor, being the wise and insightful man that he was, pulled me aside and said, we need to deal with this. We need to fix this because this isn't God's way. And throughout all this time, I knew that I should forgive, and I tried, but deep down, you just don't really want to. Like, they wronged you, and I'm justified in my anger. But he said, we need to fix this. This isn't God's way. And so we had a meeting in his office, and he said, you need to pray for this person. You need to pray that God will bless them, that he will pour himself out upon them, and you need to pray that you can forgive them. And so I remember that night I was laying in bed, and I said, God, bless them. God, let them experience you. Make yourself known to them. God, help me forgive them. And nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. I still despised this person. And so this went on for weeks and months. And I don't know where it was. It was probably sometime when I was at Rosedale, so this was like I was 19. All of a sudden I realized I wasn't so angry and bitter with this person. Yes, I still felt wronged. Yes, I still felt like that wasn't right. But I wasn't bitter about it. unless you think this is just time making everything better, I've had other things that I've grown bitter about. I've had other things where it's like, that's not right. Come on, man. And I still struggle with those things because I haven't given them to God. I've tried forgiving on my own and it doesn't work. And I think through my experience, bitterness has become this thing that I fear more than anything in a lot of ways. I fear becoming that picture of the old grumpy man, the one that everyone's wronged, nobody can do anything right. And I can see that tendency in myself. The tendency to hold on to wrongs, the tendency to hold on to mistakes that people have made. But by God's grace, that isn't who I have to become. By His power, I can forgive, I can overcome bitterness. That's really all I have to share this morning, so I'll give it back to Elmer.
Thank you, Isaac. Jesus said, forgive, and you will receive forgiveness. Don't forgive? Hello. Why would He forgive you? And, it's not hard for us to understand that bitterness is a sin. We agree with that, yes? Yeah, we agree with that. Bitterness is sin. If we have bitterness in our lives, we have to deal with it. And Isaac made a great point. What he didn't want to deal with, if he wasn't going to deal with it, it was going to turn him into something he didn't want to become. And that happens to all of us. So, I'm going to get the next person up here, and before I do, I'm just going to say, I've invited this person to talk about handling cynicism, and I asked another person, and I thought they were going to do it, and they decided to not do it. So that leaves an open slot for any of you who want to share how you handle cynicism in your life. So Phil Wanger is going to come and share what he does or says, or I don't know what he's going to say, but I said, share with us how you handle cynicism. And I don't know why Phil, except he told me he had a good object lesson, so.
Well, here's proof. So I put it up on the screen because you probably wouldn't be able to see this plaque, but a few years ago, someone in our family got this for their husband to hang on the wall. If you get this sign, you might have a problem. If you don't understand it, just be patient. Elmer will get around to your sin eventually. There's also a sign down here at the intersection that says cross traffic does not stop. A cynical person thinks, well, happy traffic doesn't stop either. And also there's no support group for cynics because, no one would come. We all think no one else has it as bad as we do, and we don't need to talk about it anyway, or it wouldn't do any good. So cynicism is like a seed, and it's interesting what Isaac said. That was like a mirror. My 17, 18-year-old self got wronged, and it does grow into be, and keeps growing. But there's many varieties of cynicism, including bitterness, doubt, sarcasm, pessimism, anger, jealousy. And I started thinking about how long ago did this start? Well, it was pretty simple. Way back in Genesis, Satan sowed that seed. He says, did God really say that? He just knows if you eat that, you're going to be like him. And Adam, he got a little bit of that seed. He's like, well, God, it's really your fault. You gave me the woman. She made me eat it. And it was interesting. The very next generation, Cain sprouted that seed. It grew into full bloom. And, he actually had the sarcasm when God came to him and said, where's Abel? What did he say? Am I my brother's keeper? You can't get more sarcastic than that. And then he just reinforced it when he said in Genesis 4:14, he said, you're driving me from the land. I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. That's his view of others. And I was thinking of other people in the Bible. Zechariah, when the angel told him that Elizabeth was going to have a baby, God shut his mouth, and it just makes you wonder. There's other people that doubted. Why did God shut his mouth? And it made me realize that what would happen, it makes me realize how popular sign language would be today if God treated us that way. All the cynical people. Anyway. So, and also just that fact that God knew that his cynicism was contagious. I am so impressed with Jesse. He has every reason to be cynical. He has every reason to be bitter. I'm so glad he's closer to his heavenly Father than he is his earthly father, because that cynicism that I've carried for so many years, he has been the most positive person that I know. It's one of those sins that grow more like a cancer. It's not an obvious sin. The symptoms we rationalize, like, I was assessing the situation, that's a good one. Or, I'm just a critical thinker. Or even better, God used cynicism and sarcasm. In Job, he asked a question that he obviously knew the answer to. He said, he asked Job, have you journeyed to the springs of the sea? Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates in the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Or he asked Moses how long his people would disobey and not listen. He knew full well what they're like. And one thing I realize is that a cynical or sarcastic person understands when you speak their language. Like this sign, if you understand it, you might have a problem. The cancer grows with each negative experience. It, like being hurt, being disappointed, like praying for healing, not seeing it happen right away. And if left unchecked, I found this cancer spreads in your relationship with Christ. And I came to the point where I realized that all these experiences caused me to even question whether all the Bible was true. And I realized I was basing my faith on my experience and not what the Bible was teaching. I found it interesting when I was getting ready, preparing for today. I looked up, the antonyms or the opposite of cynicism, and one of them is faith. And much of the fruit of the Spirit listed in Matthew is also included in the list of opposites. And by the way, the cynic in me now wonders what Google's going to bring up on my feeds the next couple months. But anyway, Hebrews talks about the men of faith. They did not see what was promised, but yet they still led their life knowing that it was going to happen. And one of the wisest men wrote in Proverbs that we should trust in the Lord with trust in the Lord with our heart and lean not on our own understanding. And that is, I believe that deals directly with cynicism. He knew that our experience, we can't trust our experience. We can't trust our knowledge. We need to go back to the Word, do what the Word says. One of the suggestions I read to control or conquer cynicism is to think positive thoughts, to concentrate on the good qualities in others, which is true, which is good. I often think, well, just don't think about it, just don't concentrate on it. My wife says that I could be cynical just fine without thinking about it. But finally, I guess the verse that really, when I start thinking these thoughts, that comes to me that I try to concentrate on is in Philippians 4:8. He says, finally, my brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, and whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
It's a good word, Phil. So Phil has done well here to prime the pump for some of you. And I think he makes a good point in that it's not just the absence of cynicism. If you sense that you're being cynical, to just stop being cynical about a situation is perhaps not enough. It's rather a call to rise up and go beyond and think positive about the situation. It's not, because we can very easily become pretty much vanilla, just erasing cynicism. But he calls us to do more than that because we live in a fallen world, and he calls us to speak into it, to change it to the positive. So just the elimination of cynicism isn't enough. It might be a huge step for a lot of us, but then to be able to project whatever's lovely, whatever's beautiful, whatever's of life. So, I would like to open the microphone and let you might have 5 minutes of something to share. You might have a paragraph. And a paragraph can be anything of a couple sentences or more. But I would just like to invite open mic for anybody who would just like to say, this is something I think I've been learning. Or maybe it's something you are confessing. Okay? Sure, Angela.
Good morning. So when Steve invited someone to testify this morning, I was hesitant. Before I came to church this morning, there's a show on Channel 2 called Sunday Morning, and it's always very informative and very intelligent, and it's not normal news, it's better. They were talking about the Holocaust, and this cute little woman who had survived it and there was pictures of where the Germans had taken pictures of these kids with their arms out and their numbers showing. She had a picture of herself there, and some people don't believe it happened, and I don't understand what they're thinking. But anyway, she said, at the end of the interview, the interviewer asked her if she forgave them, and she goes, "Forgive? I live with it." And the first thought in my mind was forgiveness is imperative, and I said it out loud. And then I had to Google imperative because I use words sometimes and I forget what they mean, but it was right. I was there. And so then I left with that thought this morning. And as I was sitting here, like at work, when there's a new kid that comes along and we're training them and I introduce myself, I always say, "I fart rainbows." And they're like, "Oh, you're a lunatic." Yes, thank you. And anyway, I'm a cynic. I am sarcastic. I I call it wit. I call it passion. And it just turns out to be ugliness coming from within me. And it's something I really, truly need to work on. You know, last night at work, I was so grumpy. Somebody had neglected the cares of a resident, and as a result, this resident was suffering. And I was just mad, and I've been mad for 2 days about it, and cynical. And I want to get the point across that we need to do proper cares for this gentleman. But I've not been doing it in a kind, considerate, and loving manner. I've been a creep. And I don't like it. And I'm a work in progress. I need fixing. This is just one of my sins. It's just a fraction of the pie. But I'm so glad that these topics are being brought up, because it does shed light on my own weakness. And I pray for everyone here and myself that we can be a light and a testimony as we walk wherever we walk. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Okay, it's good. Thanks, Angela. Someone else.
I don't know where to begin. I was that guy that he talked to, and I don't want to do this, and I don't have anything to say. I have not figured anything out about this. I don't have it all figured out. I'm sure of that. Maybe. A couple of things that came to my mind was a thought that actually my father-in-law brought to my attention. I guess that he picked it up at a seminar about 35 years ago maybe. But it's the concept that generally most people do the best that they can do. Everybody has a story. In some ways, you're a sum of the words that are spoken to you. And I think it helped me to, looking at other people who I felt have wronged me, or I think of something that somebody did, and I thought that was really stupid. I know where that's headed. But yet, considering that the person, that everybody does the best that they can with where they at in their story. We don't know what the story is of the next person. Even the very close people to you have stuff going on that you don't know about, or that influence the thoughts and reactions that you get from them. And I think with that, another thing that has helped me is making conscious decisions to give people a benefit of the doubt. And I think along with that, one way that I'm usually called back to that is in worship. As we were singing these songs this morning, it's like, hey, if everybody does and says just exactly what we went through this morning, we wouldn't have cynicism as a problem. It's just on your face before God in worship, however that might come for you. Whether it's the words of a songwriter or a song that you wrote yourself or a scripture or just spending time. I think as a lifestyle of worship, there's not much room for cynicism.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. So true. So true. Thank you.
Lynn got up, so I don't have to now, right? Elmer just said somebody backed out this morning and wondered if I'd share. And I said, I've never had a problem with cynicism, so I don't know that I need to. You're very cynical there. And we talked a little bit about it down at Elders Retreat this weekend, and I mean, I know I come across as cynical, but what hits me is the whole thing of being happy for other people's success. I mean, I've been wrong some, and I've learned to let it go. I feel I'm fairly good at that, not holding grudges and stuff. But to honestly be happy for someone when they succeed in the same field I'm in, I'm not there yet. I find jealousy but the picture I get is a boat or a ship with flags on it. The ship is pride, and then it's got these flags of jealousy, cynicism, envy, bitterness. Here we come with our worship, and we're shooting at them flags. Doesn't do a whole lot of good. One good shot at the pride would sink all those. And I know that's a pat answer, but that's a picture I had, is follow the roots back. It comes back to pride and selfishness, kind of, or it does in my life. Why aren't I happy when someone else succeeds in something that I'm in? I like myself pretty good, and it comes back to pride, I think. So it's good.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm on a journey, and I'm not saying that this is like, I have not figured this out. I don't know, like, if this applies for everything or everyone. And so I say this, just, I am young, and you guys, I'm sure, all have gone through different things, and maybe it doesn't apply as well, I guess, to everybody is what I'm trying to say. But I think for me, as far as like dealing with this, I've learned that I have to have the mindset of Christ to see that person, first of all. So, like asking the Lord for his eyes for that person and who that person is or situation or whatever it may be, to really know, to be able to have grace for that person or what they may be going through, which has been talked about a little bit this morning. But also piggybacking off of what Elmer said, I have learned also that like I can sit here all day and be like, I forgive, and just barely holding on to that, just clenching it as hard as I can. And what I've learned is that a lot of times, sorry, I'm like shaking. A lot of times so this journey I'm going through is working on what I would call my triggers, things that come up like in me that, like certain situations, or if I'm having a conversation with somebody and something just like catches me, that's my trigger. And so I'm like, where did that come from? And I'm finding out that a lot of it is my past, like different things that have happened in my past. And so if I'm able to see enough to like figure out where the hurt is in my past or just different things that I've experienced, I'm able to deal with that a lot better. And that's actually the root of it. That's the thing that has, that's made me feel that way about that person or that situation. I don't know if this is making any sense, but I have learned that looking back at what I feel like may have triggered me or what I may have felt, even though it's not valid, and that person maybe didn't even like want it to be that way towards me, but it's something that I felt, and it's true about me because it's something that I've experienced in my past. And so when you are able to deal with those triggers, and then it helps when things like that comes up in my life, and I'm like, oh, I can recognize that that's my trigger, and this is what I do to, whether it's self-talk or whatever it is, this is what I do to handle that, because it's not actually that person or that situation. It's all about like what's going on inside of me. So that's something that's worked for me, and I'm still in that journey, and I don't know if it necessarily always applies to like cynicism or any of that all the time, but it's something that's helped me.
We would all do well to pay that kind of attention to what's going on inside. And the beauty of recognizing the triggers is that you get it stopped before you add to it. Because that's what we do. We start adding to it and adding to it. Okay, that's good. All right.
You ever deal with people who are in like a 12-step program? They always start out and they say, hi, my name is Adam, Moses. We can go through the book and probably name all of them. I'm mad at God. Because none of you have ever been mad at God, right? You want unforgiveness? We all harbor unforgiveness of ourselves and God. And that translates out into you. The Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you hate your neighbor, buddy, you hate everybody else. Right? If you don't love, if I hate me, if I get up in the morning, look in the mirror and go, I hate that guy, and I look across the street and see my neighbor, I'm not going to go, hey, I really like him. And then if I get down in worship, how do I worship God when I hate God? How do I fall in love with a God who I am so bitter and angry at because of the things he's allowed in my life and the things that he's allowed to happen to other people? Don't you understand, God? And he goes, yeah, I do. And then we have to look to Jesus. And we really have to come to him and fall at his feet. And just come to that place where we say, Lord, I don't understand. Because I don't understand. And just lay our burdens down. You know? Have we come and truly laid our burdens down at the foot of the cross and said, Lord, I really want to understand your hands and your feet. I want to understand the scars on your back. I want to understand how a God who creates universes loves this clay enough to come and put himself in that position for me. And so then I have to let go of that anger and say, Lord, I don't know how to do this. I'm just doing the best I can. And then worship becomes a love experience. You know, because when you're worshiping, you understand that that breaks the yoke of the bondage of sin. You cannot tell Jesus Christ how much you love him and truly hate him. You got to let one go. And that's why worship is not pretty. Worship should never be pretty. We've made it into this nice, pretty, happy little lovely thing that we come and do and everybody plays well. You wouldn't want to have seen David's worshipers. David's wife looked out and said, do you see that fool out there? Look at that idiot out there in the street. That's called my husband. She wasn't happy with him, right? She wasn't going, yahoo, there's my husband out there really worshiping God, giving it everything he's got. I went to basketball the other night, and I watched a bunch of fools really worshiping, including me. People running around in shorts pushing a ball. The Lord died for you. He gave his very existence on this earth so that you can have everything. And yet, why don't we want to jump up and down and be a little nuts for him? I guess I'm just that guy. I guess I'm just the David. And I apologize if that offends people, because I know it does. I know there are people who don't always like me for that. But that's okay. Because when I get home, heaven is not a quiet place. It says every time someone comes to salvation, all of heaven rejoices. And I get news for you. Every second of every hour of every minute of eternal time, someone's getting saved. Someplace in this world. So heaven is not a quiet place. We like to see little harps and, I don't know, whatever garbage up there. And then everybody sits on a cloud. I got bad news for you. That is not the heaven that I worship. The heaven I worship is kind of gritty and dirty and not in our earthly, but them people are going nuts. Them people are having a great time thanking the Lord for what He's doing every second. The cherubim and seraphim never stop being insane. They don't. Every hour of every day, of every second, of every eternal moment, they're going, woohoo! Jesus is the Lord, and He did it all. Ha-ha! I know I'm nuts.
That's why we call him Crazy Larry. It's good. It's good.
So my thoughts might be kind of scattered this morning because I didn't prepare to come up here and share anything. But when Elmer started talking about forgiveness and cynicism and so on, a lot of things went through my mind. But I've gone through my own journey of bitterness and anger. Was in an abusive marriage for close to 20 years. And during that time, was confronted with my own bitterness and anger. I became very bitter, and Elmer was the one that confronted me about it, actually. And I came to the place where I realized that, this is just destroying me. Because the truth is, when we feel, if we're unforgiving, we feel resentment, anger, and whatever it is, that's my feelings. I'm the one that feels them. The other person doesn't feel it. I feel it. And I decided I wanted to get rid of this. I'm just going to let it go. But then, it was probably another 10 years or more of a journey of really understanding how to let the feelings go, how to really just let the last bit of it leave me. And I did come to that place where I'd completely forgiven. I did not feel anything anymore. And then, about 10 years ago, when I started dating Mike, and all of the turmoil that created in the community and here in the church, and I got very hurt again. By what my church family did. And I feel that that's almost unfair to say now, because there were a lot of you that also were a great support to me during that time. But I was very hurt. And, but I think the point I'm trying to make by saying this is, it goes back to what Isaac said. It's like, does it really matter whether they really wronged you or not? It's what you think happened. That's what makes you feel how you feel, because it's what we think about things that create our feelings. So again, it's like my feelings were what I was feeling. It wasn't like it was hurting anyone else. Sometimes I think we hang on to anger and resentment because we think somehow we're punishing someone else. Well, the truth is we're only punishing ourselves. And you would think that all of the things I had learned previously about forgiveness and letting it go would, make it easy to forgive again when you feel hurt. But that's not the case. I mean, everything becomes fresh again, and you've got to relearn it all over again. And I can say truthfully that, I'm past that. I've forgiven. if there was anything to forgive, but mostly it was just letting go of my own, feelings. The other thing that I feel like I got some realization on, and you talked about that verse where Jesus said, forgive and you will be forgiven, but if you don't forgive, your Heavenly Father won't forgive you. And for a long time, I just kind of thought that was sort of an arbitrary thing that Jesus said, if you don't forgive other people, well, then God isn't going to forgive you. Just kind of like withholding forgiveness. But I think the realization that I came to is that the same channel or conduit through which love and forgiveness flows between us and other people is the same channel and conduit through which we feel love and forgiveness from God. And if we stop that up inside of ourselves, we close up the possibility of forgiveness from God. We can't, it's not like he's not there just ready to forgive, but we don't experience it and we don't feel it because we have closed up that part of ourselves. So.
Thank you. I think that's exactly right. And it's tough to wrap around it in our journey because it's so real. So real. And it's one thing to be able to forgive and move on if they quit doing it to you. But if they just keep doing it to you, how do you forgive and forgive and forgive and not be cynical? And when they say, I'm sorry, yes, I know. Sure you are. Absolutely. Knowing good and well they're going to do it again. Yeah. Anybody else yet?
So one of the questions a long time ago when we were starting out the adoption process that we had to answer in one of the millions of forms is, how are you going to handle microaggression? And I was like, well, first off, what is that? Because I don't know how to handle it. And so I Googled it, and it was talking about how my boys are obviously of a different race. They look different, right? And there will be comments that are made, and they're not intended to be mean. They're not, but that it can be viewed as microaggression. And it's not that people, and it's not even just about their race. It could be about adoption, or it could be, any number of things, that it's little comments that are made, and it kind of ticked me off. Why would I teach my children about microaggression? Because if I teach my children to look for these comments, every comment that is now made is going to be against them, right? Like, well, they don't like me because my skin is a different color. Well, they don't like me because I don't look like my parents. Well, they don't like me because, I have a funny accent. There's a million things that they could feel towards themselves. And it's the same with us. Like, somebody does something, there they go again. I know how they feel about me. I mean, they make it pretty clear. And that's not their intent. Like, this week in our lives, Dwayne and I had a few little fights. The one morning I woke up and I was like, why is he mad at me? I don't know. He's like, well, you kicked me to bed last night. I didn't kick you to bed. You said you were tired. And I said, go ahead and go to bed, honey. I got it. I'll take care of the kids. And he's like, well, you were mad at me and you kicked me to bed. And I was like, no, I wasn't. And it's just that. Like, we take little things against us, or we view them as against us, and they're not at all, because we didn't see their heart behind it, right? And this morning I did something, and beating myself up again, and like, why? Why can't I change? Why do I react this way? And I picked up Facebook, and it was a post by Lisa Turquoise. I can't even say her name. Anyways. And she was talking about exactly that. And she was saying, like, we react. And why do we react the same way? And we need to change our minds. And growing up, we had that verse like pounded in our heads, don't be conformed to this world, don't be conformed to this world. And it's true. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that was her point. We need to renew our minds daily. We need to rewire our minds. They didn't mean that as mean. Like, maybe ask them, what did you mean behind that? What was your point behind that? But it's in our minds. And if I just let it build, next thing I know, I wake up and I have an angry husband that I didn't know was angry.
Just like that. Exactly.
I've had a few opportunities over the years to be cynical. I mean, after all, there's some Cub fans in here, really? Anyway, I better not go there. About 16, 17 years ago, I was introduced, I think Loretta Helmuth introduced me to a teaching called Love and Logic. Any of you familiar with Love and Logic? A few of you? It's basically a way where you can help children take ownership of the things they do at an appropriate level. And whether it's the dog ate my homework, I wasn't allowed to do my homework yesterday. Again, our kids don't do that, but it's a real couple phrases that we're supposed to use in teaching is probably so, nice try. But there's a key. There's a key in using those. You are never supposed to use those unless you have empathy. Can you be cynical if you have empathy? Not a chance in the world. So, go ahead and light the cups up. Matthew 22:39, it was quoted. The second commandment is likened to it, love your neighbor as yourself. If I have empathy, I can say the things I need to say. If I don't have empathy, I may not say, nice try. But if I have empathy, I can say, nice try. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the situation. For me, empathy is the key.
And it is, and that's a good word. What if? I sometimes just get this picture that this force sitting right here and is going to walk out the door into our work world where we meet up with all sorts of cynicism, sarcasm, disappointment with people and their performance. What if, as Lawrence alluded to, as Lynn talked about, what if we knew their story? What if we considered their story? And what brought them to be at the place where they are, that their performance was like it was to create that kind of an atmosphere. Eileen, either last night or this morning, brought me a little quote by Francis Frangipane. It was on Facebook. It's out of his book, The Three Battlegrounds. And Frangipane says, every area in your thinking that glistens with hope in God is an area which is being liberated by Christ. So every place that glistens with God, you're being liberated. But any system of thinking that does not have hope, which feels hopeless, is a stronghold which must be pulled down. If it doesn't have hope, it's a stronghold that must be pulled down. Wow. As we think about making a difference in the world in which we live, we can't afford to be those who have no hope. We can't afford to be those who join in on the cynicism, because that's a form of non-hope. It's a form of curse. We have to rise above and declare hope into their situation. Declare life into their situation. And how are we going to do that? Is when we are in that moment when it's very justifiable in all means to indeed be cynical, as we find ourselves saying within, I'm sorry. And we add life. We look for life. Because we empathize, we recognize that indeed our fellow brothers and sisters, our fellow humankind is going to fall short. But we are those who bring life. That's what we do. It's the way. And it's fun. It is the very fruit of the Spirit. So, Father, I thank you so much for this time together with these people. And, Father, we recognize that we're all on this journey. And we all have opportunity to be life givers, because it's a way of the kingdom that we are life givers. And we want to be those life givers. So, Father, the life that you've given us, even as you raised us up out of death with Christ, in that raising us up, we become the new man, the one who's done with bitterness, done